So welcome to the Mock Me podcast. We've got Farmer Jesse here. Farmer Jesse is in Kentucky, and I just found out about him, to be honest, just a few days ago. And I've done a little creeping, I've done a little YouTubing, and what a story we got over here. I mean, I have a ton of respect for the people that if I just dropped on a spaceship in a jungle or something, I think this guy would figure out how to feed a civilization. Like innate ability. So thanks for coming on, Jesse.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So tell everyone about what you're doing right now and a little bit about how you got to this place.
Yeah. So my wife and I own a farm down in central Kentucky. Like our main thing is farming. I do a lot of other stuff. I do the no-till growers is like the name of the company that I run with my buddy Jackson and Josh Satin. But we have a farm in central Kentucky. It's about, we operate on 3/4 of an acre. So super small, intensive market gardening, vegetable production, mostly lettuce, a lot of lettuce, a lot of carrots, beets, green onions, that sort of stuff. Those are kind of our cherry tomatoes. Those are sort of our pride crops. Those are the ones that really do well for us at market. So that's like our main thing here. That's what we do. But then I also do no-till growers. Like I said, this website, we sort of aggregate a lot of no-till information in the small scale world. Whereas the larger scale stuff was out there, roller crimping. And then on the conventional side, like the herbicide stuff was out there, but there wasn't. And then on the small side, like backyard gardening, there was a lot of that sort of thing, but there was nothing for our scale, that sort of like 1/2 acre to 3 acre to 5 acre sort of range. So this was a few years ago. We kind of decided to start the website, but also start the podcast, the No-Till Market Garden podcast. And we got really into kind of just gathering as much information about this as we possibly could, because there was just nothing out there. I mean, like I said, you could find stuff about, backyard gardening, and you could find stuff from like Rodale Institute about roller crimping. And Gabe Brown is, a little bit out there, but there wasn't much, like there was not much information about sort of no-till on our scale. So that's what we've been working on.
How deep are you into it now? You had a previous property and now you're moving to a new place where you're at now?
Yeah, we've been at the new place for like a couple months. So yeah, it's really intense. Like we just moved farms. We've been on that last farm for 4 years.
So you're like taming the mud right now. Like you had all this compost and wood that you've kind of built up. You built the soil up at the previous place, and now you're going to kind of a place just from scratch.
Yeah, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, I mean, we left that property in great condition. So like, I can't feel bad about it, but it's not, I don't want to be flippant about it, but it's not that hard to rebuild our gardens. Like it's a lot of work and a fair amount of money. But once they're up and operating, now that we've got a good system for sort of managing the fertility and managing the microbial life and kind of re-inoculating the microbial life into the soil, I'm not that worried about it. And I'm actually kind of excited to see how fast it'll come back. It'll take some time. I mean, there's definitely going to be new issues with this property that we didn't have on the last one. So it's all kind of an education for me, which is good because for the podcast, we try on our farm a bunch of different no-till methods. We're not like, this is our method, this is the only one we're sticking to. And the reason is I want to have perspective on every method, because if I'm talking to a wide range of different kinds of growers, I want to be able to say like, oh yeah, I've tried that. Like I ran into that same problem, or, oh, I tried that. I didn't do it that way. That makes more sense. Just that perspective is great to add value for the listener.
I'm all ears right now, and I am learning from scratch, which is so much easier than trying to come up with something that we're both doing. So where are you selling all your products now? Is it CSA, or are you all selling it from the place? You got a distribution network? How are you getting rid of and getting value out of that?
Yeah. So for for most of our farming since 2012 is when our farm business started. I interned for 2 years, but in 2012 was when our farm business really started. And we've done a CSA every year. Yeah, I think that's right. Every year from 2012 until last year. Last year, we tried to get rid of our CSA last year, but then COVID hit and we were like, well, scratch that. We're going to do the CSA again. But this year we are dropping the CSA. It's been great. We love the CSA, but I wrote a book and we can talk about that a little bit later. And that's going to throw in some travel in the fall and maybe in the summer that I'm going to have to, I wanted to have a little bit more flexibility. So we're going more with, farmers market style. So almost exclusively the farmers market. And then the other portion of that is going to be some on farm sales. So we do like a market card instead of the CSA. So it's basically just like, if you kick us $200, we'll give you this card and throw an extra $10, or I forget if it's $10 or I think it's $10 for every 200. So it's like, kick them a little bit of extra money. And then for us, that's like 4 items off of our table. Essentially, that's like 4 bunches of carrots or something extra for $200. So it's not a super good deal, but it's, they get a little extra for supporting us early on. So they buy the card, sort of like a CSA, you buy it early, but then they can just spend it on whatever. And we send out a list in the early part of the week. And we say like, this is what we're going to have this week. And people can put their orders in. And in that way, they can come to the market or come to the farm and just pick it up in a bag or, whatever. And it's good for people who are, concerned about COVID, like with, especially a lot of our customers are older and they're definitely like have been very, very cautious, and we're super respectful of that. So like we wanted to offer some sort of contactless option as well. And so, but also like if you're at the farmer's market, we get a line, it gets slam busy. If you have that card and you've already paid online, you've already pre-ordered or whatever, you just come, snag your bag and walk off. So like it makes some, it's good for efficiency. It's good for that sort of contactless thing. And it's good for people who just kind of want first dibs on stuff. Cause especially in the middle of the summer, like we can't keep carrots on the table. We can sell, I think one weekend 2 years ago, we sold over 400 bunches of carrots in a weekend. And it was just like, you just can't keep them on the table. So that's something for those people, and especially like summer lettuce can be kind of fickle. So if we run out of that, at least they get first dibs on that. So it's kind of a good option for them to buy in early. So it's like a CSA, but you kind of get to choose what you want in your bag in a sense.
So are you going Lexington, Louisville, Cincinnati, or more closed?
We could do all 3 of those. We're only like an hour and a half from Cincinnati, an hour from Louisville. We're about 30 minutes from Lexington. So we could do all 3, but we're focusing on Lexington and also Frankfurt, like our state capital's like right up the road. So we do that. And Lawrenceburg's got some people because it's kind of a suburb. That's where we live. So we kind of want to, if the more we can bring it in, the better for us. I'd rather do as little traveling per week as possible. That's just, anytime you're traveling, you're losing money.
So can you give me the cliff notes so you're working with wood quite a bit, like a compost and mulch. Is that the foundation? You're doing no dig, no till. And I was watching terminating cover crops with tarps and getting the crimping and getting it into the soil. Can you kind of cliff note exactly kind of the system that you're really passionate about, how it works?
Yeah, so kind of like I said, we try a bunch of different stuff on our farm. So I do that, like I said, just to kind of have some perspective on it. And that was also helpful for me writing the book to make sure that I was able to talk to each of those kind of methods. But the methods that I like the most and that we use the most are kind of a combination of like you were saying, like a deep mulch of compost, what they call the no dig style over in England. We do that a lot. So that is essentially like, if somebody was going to use this method, and I know a guy using it on 20 acres, that's about the biggest I've seen it on, I think. But you're essentially doing a 4 to 6 inch layer of compost, and you're laying that down on a clean bed. So you need, clean soil. You need something let's start from the beginning. You plow it, till it up, disc it, whatever you're going to do to it. You get rid of the weeds. You maybe do one last power harrow, and then you build your beds. And some people would want raised beds if you're in a colder climate or in a super wet climate. You'd want the raised beds so they'd warm up faster. But otherwise, then you're just going to layer your compost pretty thick. And then that's basically your growing medium. Mm-hmm. And the idea there is that compost obviously is really rich in nutrients, but you do want it to have some amount of access to the native soil because you want it to have access to all 17 macro and micronutrients. So you are planting into that compost, but the roots can still penetrate into the native soil. A lot of people will also put a piece of cardboard or some sort of paper mulch underneath it to block that compost, to sort of act as a weed barrier while that compost breaks down. We do that if we have enough time to, and that just ensures that there's no perennial weeds going to pop through. And it's not a perfect system. Then there's obviously there's no perfect system in agriculture, but it eliminates the weeds by, we don't do barely any cultivation. We spend, for an intensive market garden to only spend maybe like half a morning every 10 or so days in the middle of the growing season, just like spot weeding. Mm-hmm. That's kind of our cultivation, and it's great. Like I don't use any of my hose or anything anymore. And we were a tillage farm. Like we started out doing more tillage. So I was used to doing a lot of cultivation. I spent hours and hours and hours cultivating, but now, we're kind of done at 5 o'clock, and there's no super long days of just pulling weeds or cultivating the aisles or any of that stuff. So a lot of people. What was
the big driver? Like, what was like, why am I working the ground? Why am I tilling it? Was it someone you met? Was it just something you saw that every time I till, I get a flush, or what was it?
It's a combination of those things. There's definitely like some aha moments where I realized like cultivation was just eating up a lot of our time. And we knew this from the beginning. We wanted to be no-till in the very beginning, but like I said, there was just not a lot of information about how to do that. There was this stuff about cover cropping, but I was like, well, how am I supposed to crimp on like 3/4 of an acre? Like what machine? There was some gaps there. And there was just like several people that sort of filled in those gaps for me. So like one of them was Singing Frogs Farm out in California in Sebastopol. They kind of do a deep compost mulch. And Charles Dowding, Richard Perkins are two others that do that. And then Daniel Mays is one that filled in some of the gaps on cover cropping. He does 3 acres in cover crops, and they use like a tamping bar, just like a bar tied to your feet, like a T-post, and tie it to your feet. 2 people stand on either side of the bed. I think they do 4-foot beds, and they just walk and they just tamp it down, and it stomps down the rye. They throw a black silage tarp over top that occultates it. So it just, kind of cooks that rye, kills it off, pull it back. They plant their fall crops, and they're just, they're ready to go. They're up in Maine. They do summer cover cropping and stuff too. And they do, can utilize that cold a little better than we can down here in Kentucky. But, they, for winter kill cover crops, they do a lot of that sort of thing. But there was just a few of those, we always cared about soil health, and we always cared about wanting to reduce the amount of weed pressure that we had and the amount of work that we were putting in on just fighting weeds. I got tired of just battling.
Yeah.
And farming shouldn't be battling. It should, I think about like farmers as stewards, right? Our job is not to battle. Our job is to like help the plants grow, not like fight the other plants from growing. That's just not what we're supposed to be doing. So, we tried a bunch of like hay mulches and stuff, and that worked okay, but we kind of came with some weed issues. And I haven't totally given up on hay, but that's for another day. It's just so many nutrients in hay. But weed seeds was an issue. So like when we found the compost mulching, and we kind of trialed it more with like what's called lasagna style. This is a very typical backyard thing where they'll, maybe like cardboard or straw, and then compost, cardboard, straw, compost, that sort of thing. Like it's just layers like a lasagna. Mm-hmm. We've been experimenting more with that, with putting the compost over top of hay and letting that break down for several months. And so it's getting some of those great nutrients from the hay, and it's blocking the weed seed pressure. But then that's going to be we're doing that at this new plot for, I think we've got like 20 something beds that way. And just to see like how much better those beds perform. And also I worry a little bit about putting that much compost down, in terms of nutrient excesses. And I don't like the idea of pollution. So adding that carbonaceous element with the hay is the goal is to kind of to reduce, to balance out some of that nutrient nutrient issue. So the hay goes down first, compost goes over top of it, allows it to break down, and then I plant straight into the compost. And then those roots can work their way down to the native soil. And ideally you would have a cover crop before you planted a cash crop, but we can't always do that, especially on the new property. We kind of have to go for it.
I can't imagine 3/4 of an acre. Are you like myself that you experiment? You've got 5 or 10 or 20 different things at really small plots to kind of figure out what you're going to do next year, or do you rely more on hearsay and your podcast and learning, and then you plug it in, or what's kind of that thought process there?
It's both. I mean, it's we do a lot of planning, but that doesn't mean I don't go on whims. So like some of it, I feel some amount of obligation to experiment with different methods and different trials, but then some of that is just, it makes sense in the moment. So let me think if I can think of an example, because we do a lot of interplanting. So one of the things that we do a lot of,
that's why I was so drawn to you. Like, I think we both are kind of biohacks, right? So
yeah,
we're trying to maximize photosynthesis, but then you can also use other plants as ancillary benefits, water drawdown, shading, all this kind of stuff. And I saw your post and I retweeted it a couple times because I'm like, oh, he's making shapes. He's thinking about this forethought and how it's actually going to grow, its size and shape and all that kind of stuff. Did you kind of get that just through doing this several years and being like, oh, I can optimize this, or how did you get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, that's it. It was kind of looking out there and being like, this is not a great use of space, just having this one single crop growing in there. I could, for instance, tomatoes take forever to mature. Mm-hmm. Why am I not running lettuce or radishes below them? Or let's say a really good one that I got from my buddy, Jared Smith at Jared's Real Food out in California, is like having head lettuces on hand at all times. And basically, like if you have a poor stand of carrots or like a mediocre stand of carrots, it's like keepable, but it's not, it's not killer. You go in and fill in the gaps with head lettuce. And then, so there's practical sides of it. There's also the biological stuff. Like, I really love planting flowers below various crops. Like sweet alyssum is a really good one. That's one I got from my buddy Daniel Mays. Nasturtiums, though, are also a good one just for drawing in pollinators, drawing in beneficials, but also like something like the nasturtiums. These are really fragrant flowers. They're kind of keeping we've noticed that we have less cucumber beetle when we plant our cucumbers near our nasturtiums. Marigolds are another one. So and marigolds actually have, a lot of below ground benefits as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to the biological side of things. But there's also like a practical side.
With flavor in certain ways? Like if you put a vegetable next to another vegetable, can you manipulate anything, or can you really screw it up?
Well, yeah. I don't know if you could really screw up the flavor, but you could definitely manipulate. You could definitely screw up the pairing, like they don't work well together. I actually, in the book, I go into a lot of interplanting strategy. And there's some really cool ones out there, and we can talk about some of those. The flavor, not so much. There's a book by a guy named, I don't have my books in here, I forgot. But there's a guy who's out in England who did a book on growing for flavor that's really interesting, and it's very science-based. Gosh, I'm forgetting his name, but I think it's just called Growing for Flavor. So that's, if you're interested in like modifying flavor, improving flavor, he did a whole book on it. And it's kind of like, it looks like a backyard gardening book, but he like kind of dives into some good science. He's a scientist himself. So
do you think you'll have a hit on your flavor now that you're going to a new venue where you don't have the soil biology, maybe at to that certain level? Are you worried about not only production, but getting that full flavor?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't worry as much about it the first year. I worry about everything on the second year.
Okay. Yeah, because you get that kind of carbon flush, and
you get that nitrogen
so
carbon bump.
Before you got here, was it pasture or?
Yeah, it was just continual grazed horse pasture. That's most of what Kentucky is. So
organic like that.
Yep, because they haven't used anything. So, yeah. And they sign, when you want to certify something really quick, as long as they'll sign something that says like, I haven't used anything on those fields in the last 3 years, then you're good.
So speaking of that, that's what we did. We bought an 11-acre property with a house, and we could put a renter in there that basically paid the note. So we had 10 acres that, that's a lot of work in organic. We worked up about 5 and did the sheep tracker, chicken tracker, popcorn, hemp thing. But do you think this is a huge opportunity? All this lands and nooks and crannies and woods that you can simply certify organic quickly. Is that happening at scale in your neck of the woods? Is that
I have never thought of it as like a opportunity, but it is. I mean, it's a great way of putting it.
It just seems so silly that there's a 3-year transition and you're going into land that has all these chemicals and you've killed your microbiome when you could just go in and get that. I mean, we were in the same situation. We had a cow pasture and I mean, shit, I probably got 5 or 6 years of a carbon, flush coming out that I can really tap into. And, as we build this market up, this is what I'm going to be looking for. Yeah.
I think it's a great way of thinking about it.
Either. You don't know if it was grazed correctly.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of nutrient deficiencies and stuff when you end up in those like really worn out sort of crop grounds that have chemicals and you have to wait 3 years and transition it over. I mean, maybe there's like a less flat area just next to the house that you could put in an acre and certified organic and I mean, make 3 times the amount on whatever crop it is. Mm-hmm. I think I mean, I love being certified organic. I have to say, like, there are things about it I don't agree with. I don't agree with like the hydroponics necessarily. Like, I do think that it should be in soil just for, the health of the soil, but also the health of the crop. Not that I have anything against hydroponics, but I think like in terms of that label. But I mean, like if I go to market, so if you go to a farmer's market right now, you'll see like several really cool looking growers. They'll have great produce and they won't have any signage that says what they do. So like you can assume they're organic, or you can even ask them if they're going to spray, but you put that certified organic sign behind you and on your table, you have instant customer base. Mm-hmm. People come to you and say, thank you for being certified organic. I'm going to buy your stuff. I'm so happy you're here. And you could go into any market and do that. And that's like, what a power that is, because all those other people, they're having to build up their customer base by being like, yes, we don't spray, like we really believe in soil biology and all these things. And they're saying the right things, but as the customer, like there is something nice about being beholden to like the paperwork and like saying like, literally like I by law have to, adhere to these certain practices. I think that they like that. And that instant customer base thing is really underrated, especially in the market farming world. I don't know how that works in like a more wholesale environment, but for us, it's critical. And we came into Lexington just a couple of years ago. We were a new farm. We got into our market I guess it was 4 years ago. We got into our market because one of the certified organic farms was dropping out. And we were like, we're certified organic, and they let us in. I mean, there were a lot of vegetable farms that wanted into that market, but we're certified organic. So we got into the market that way and instantly had customer base. I mean, it's not that expensive either. I think there's this misconception that it's like wildly expensive to be certified organic. And I think this year, maybe they're dropping the 75% rebate. I don't know, but they have been for the last several years doing a 75% rebate. So you're paying $250. You're filling out a little paperwork. There's like an audit and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you're getting a 75% rebate on that. And so your price to get certified organic is like $65 or something. So like, per project, like for us, like we could certify, several acres of garden, or half an acre, it doesn't matter, but it would all be the same price. But if we wanted to certify a pasture or like a mushroom operation or something else, it would be another 65 or 250 or whatever it is going to be this year. So it's just a no-brainer to me. I think the organic certification in our context.
What do you want to talk about? Let's talk about
I want to get back to interplanting. Okay. Let's go back to interplanting, because I could talk on interplanting all day long. I really you may even be a little bit more familiar with this. Like one of the things that I learned, I did a lot of research in writing the book, and we can talk a little bit about the book. It's the Living Soil Handbook. It'll come out in July. It's coming out through Chelsea Green, who published Gabe Brown and who published, Elliot Coleman and all those folks. But one of the things that I focused on was interplanting, because I felt like there was ideas out there, they're like, oh yeah, you can put some tomatoes in the ground and, plant some radishes under, like we talked about earlier. But some of the other ones, the more nuanced stuff, like root complementarity, which is like how you're, deep rooted crops versus like shallow rooted crops, and kind of pairing those together so that they're not necessarily contending for nutrients. Like that's one. Also thinking about critical period of competition, or the critical period of weediness. This is something that like a lot of is more common in the conventional farming world, that people talk about this, especially agronomists.
I think about all that stuff, I think it's bullshit.
Well, see, I went through some of the research, and I was pretty interested to see like what people had found in the research that they'd done. But the thing is, like, it may be, I mean, some of it may be bullshit, but some of it is like,
especially like relay stuff. I mean, it really is about the amount of light and about the amount of the finites. But there might be some crops that are a little bit more sensitive than other crops, but
that's what I think
a lot of it's a fear tactic. I think it's a fear tactic to sell, equipment and chemical.
It could be, but here's where I found it helpful is, so they did some studies up in, I think the gentleman's name is Swanton, and they did some studies up in Canada about carrots, right? So I've been having troubles with interplanting carrots, because what'll happen is that you end up with these really long greens, right? You get these really beautiful, robust greens in really small tubers because of the light, right? So they're competing for light. If they have too much competition around them, they're going to put their energy into creating leaves as opposed to the tubers that you want, the roots. And the thing so that was one of the things, is I'm going through the root complement, or the critical period of competition, and I'm realizing like it's answering, like ticking off questions for like the answers for me for questions I have, like, why don't my carrots work as well in an interplant? And it was like, this is the time period. So I started to kind of gauge some of my plantings by that, some of those time periods, and realized like I was getting better crops by not planting stuff in or around my carrots early on, and giving them a little bit more space. I mean, space is important. So there was a little bit of that. And I think, probably for your world, like in terms of selling herbicide and that sort of stuff, it probably is like, heaved on you a little bit extra. But
I think there's a huge difference between polycropping and relay cropping. You've seen my wheat and soybeans. The wheat lives by itself, so it's able to genetically express, and it has the entire sunlight. And instead of going straight up, it goes out, and it creates these phi shapes. And then I bring on the soybeans, and as long as I put that wide enough, then I can start using the wheat to suck up moisture, and I can make a microclimate, and it lives in the roots and all that stuff. With polycropping, it's like sometimes I kind of don't see the point, other than grabbing different shapes and sizes of sunlight capture on sides and stuff. But
and there's some of that, like dicots and monocots, like planting lettuces below corn or something, right? The shapes and the way that their roots complement each other too,
and shade the sun that way. But
there's also like in terms of the like relay cropping, as you were talking about, there's a lot, that sort of critical period of weed control, or critical period of competition, I found comes in handy for knowing, like the carrot example. When I started waiting on my carrots and letting them get pretty mature before doing any sort of relay, I could relay in another crop, even something like squash with kind of sensitive roots. I could pull those carrots, like make a little planting space, pop a squash in there maybe a week or two before I'm pulling those carrots, let that get established, pull those carrots, and then it just takes over the bed. And it happens fast. And then I'm not waiting till the carrots are out and then putting your squash in. So like the squash is establishing while the carrots are growing, and then the carrots come out and the squash is like, boom, takes over the bed, no weeds.
The point of constant canopy, expediting canopy closure and seeing an opportunity. And what I think people don't understand about what I'm doing is, if I put the wheat out there, then the soybeans, if it rains like 7 inches, my beans normally would just take a shit, and they'll lose all the root hairs, and they'll die, and they won't grow. Where they'll live in the roots and actually have a big brother sucking up moisture. So I'll make my entire crop grow vigorously when the other stuff looks like dog shit, because it doesn't have the help. So and then you can expedite camp people, just like you're saying. But the reason why I was a landscaper in my 20s, and I would have the crocuses come up like in February, they'd bloom, and then I'd put my pansies in there, and then I'd plant my summer shit like in, late April. And I had, each flower bed had 13 different things going on. So then I come to the farm, and we're like ingrained that everything is competition, that it's like I'm either in control or I'm losing the battle. And there's no like, I'm not lying that probably 80% of the old timers think that anything that's green is competition. Cover crops are taking up nutrients, and it's a tragedy that not more farmers don't understand just the biological realm of nature. It's all chemical and competition.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes out of that generation too, just generally in society, because my grandfather, I tried to get him to eat organic food, and he's like, I trust the scientist. I trust the chemicals. I don't want to eat that stuff. And it kind of blew me away, but I was also like, yeah, I mean, he's told that he came out of an era that was like much more disease ridden, so like people got more sick, the polio era and all that stuff. So maybe like in cleanliness, like all of those things were really important. And so he was like, yeah, chemicals, it equals cleanliness, it equals sanitation, and that keeps you healthy. So like they probably think the same thing. And
sterilization was the canvas that created COVID, in my opinion.
I mean, I don't know if I could really debate on that. I'm not much of a viral, epidemiologist.
Not that it wouldn't happen, but our fear, like, if you got the practice in the antibodies, and you're healthy, I don't, you saw it wasn't a big deal. But
well, how does that? I mean, I'm always curious when people, I've tried to study up pretty well on COVID, but I'm always like, I mean, smallpox wiped out the Indians, and those have like millions of Native Americans, and those have to be the healthiest population, probably to ever walk the native, North America. I think that, native
smallpox.
Yeah. I mean,
it wasn't even a common. I mean, if you're my age, it all ran through everyone, and hardly anyone even had a symptom.
What's that? COVID?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've had several friends that had it. So
bad?
Yeah. I had a few friends that had it bad. I haven't lost anybody. I'm thankful for that, but yeah, pretty bad.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it just, it doesn't, like, some of that, I think that, like, I think that it's some people's immune system is not going to be perfect for it. And even if they're healthy, but like I try to be pretty compassionate about people who have loved ones who maybe didn't make the best lifestyle choices, who maybe tried to make them later on in life and tried to change their diet, but maybe were down on their health going into their 30s or 40s, 50s, 60s, and were like, making a change. And then something like COVID comes on, and it's unfortunate. It's like, for those people, I want to fight. I want to make sure that they get the chance that they deserve, because they realize later on they've been fed this garbage about, like, yeah, chemicals are better. So that's the sanitation, like, their whole life. And then they realize at some point, like, oh, it's about my microbiome. It's about eating healthy food. It's about being in the dirt. They realize that later on. And so here we are trying to, like, this crazy novel virus comes out, and they're really susceptible because the decisions that society really made for them early on, they try and change later on in life, and they kind of get the short end of the stick. Like, those are the kind of people I like to, think about and try to fight for.
So speaking of the microbiome, you got, the soil is just like your gut. And, back in the day, if you pick an apple, have a little bird shit on there, you just eat it anyway. And we had that, with that machine going on in our gut. What conversations do you have with people when you're at the farmer's market about microbiome, the soil, and kind of that?
It's funny. Last year we started putting no-till, or maybe it was a couple of years ago. We started just putting out the sign that said no-till, just kind of as an experiment, just to put it on our table. And not a lot of people really reacted to it. Some people were like, what's the significance? Like, what does that mean? And that gave us a chance to talk about soil biology and health and that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, I think, like, there's been a boom in interest about the microbiome and about how, over the last 10 years, that, like, certainly bacteria and fungi and all the things that live on our skin and in our bodies, has gotten a lot more attention in a positive light. And so I think that's definitely in the conversation, but it's not something that is explicit. Like, people are not necessarily coming up and saying that, but it definitely happens. You end up in those conversations where people are eating your food because they know there's real living dirt, real living soil on it. They like that. And they view some of the, other producers who maybe bring in their food as kind of too sterile. So that's shifting, and that's good. I think that's a really positive thing. And yeah, having people be more concerned with what they're eating and thinking about it more like you are what you eat, you literally are what you eat. And so thinking about like, what do you want to eat? You want to eat the chemicals that are like killing, is that what you want to be? So like, I think people are thinking more about that, and it's great. The farmers market has been, it's a viable option now for farmers. Like, it is a viable way to make a living. Mm-hmm. And it's because of that. It's because of that mentality change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you want to get into?
Well, what's interesting, I'm going to talk about the book for a second, but then I want to weave that into a conversation about our business model, because I think it's kind of for the no-till growers business model. So the book is, like I said, it's the Living Soil Handbook. It'll come out in July, and it's on pre-order now. And this is what's important, is that it's on pre-order now through no-tillgrowers.com. We sell like hats sometimes, and we sell this book, and we have a Patreon page, and the Patreon page makes like $3,000 a month. We take donations, like just Venmo or wherever, and we're always looking for like different avenues. And what all that adds up to is we're a for-profit business that operates like a nonprofit. And where that's valuable is we use the things that we are excited about. Like, we're able to turn what we're interested in, what we're excited about, and get people to just kind of contribute money to that. And then we give it away for free. So it's this sort of opposite business models for what a lot of people are doing, which is like maybe building paywalls, and which, to each his own. I'm totally fine with that. But for us, we were like, how do we do the opposite? Like, how do we not have paywalls? How do we give this information away for free? And the whole thing was we need a diversity of funding sources. So that's where Patreon and all these other, I wrote the book, I get like a royalty from the publisher, but we're selling it through the site, like specifically to make money so that we can make more content. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm always wondering, like, is there a model for that in farming? Like, could we use that sort of, base idea of like, how do you keep your food at a reasonable cost? Like, our food is expensive, but how do we keep it at a reasonable cost so anybody can afford it, and also still make the money we need to make? And some of the models for that are out there are like the CSAs. There's these CSAs out in Germany, and they are like membership clubs that the farm takes on like a membership fee every year. They have like dozens of people that, contribute. And they also do a CSA. So like, everybody who wants to be in the CSA has to be a member, but everybody that's a member is not necessarily a CSA member. They may get some, like, if there's excess tomatoes or something, they may get in on that, or they may get to contribute somehow. But really what they're contributing to is the property. They're contributing to that soil health. They're contributing to having a living, working farm in their city or in their suburbs or whatever it is. And I'm always like, how do we do more of that? Like, how do we make it, because, how do we make it so that our food can compete with something like Kroger? Like, how do we, or, Myers, whatever you have up there, like how do we do that in a way that doesn't make it financially impossible for us as small scale growers who are doing most of this by hand? And that's sort of what we're kind of toying with, like using no-till growers sort of as a proving ground to figure out like, what are the sources? Like, we've been applying for grants, and I was just talking to a guy who's a researcher, and he was like, hey, I didn't know about your stuff recently, but would you be interested in having us write you into a grant in the future? And I was like, yes, like, all these alternative funding sources exist. And I think like, it'd be cool to see what it's just interesting to think about how that could also be applied to agriculture. I don't know. That was on my mind today, just thinking like, if that was something that came up, I should talk about it, because I think that's an interesting approach yeah, like the sort of for-profit business that operates like a nonprofit.
So you've got some pretty impressive YouTube views. How long have you been doing that, and how have you acquired such a following on YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube is tough. It is like if somebody's, I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is that, you know, we make decent videos and I try and make them funny. I don't always succeed, but we try and make them funny, and we try and have it be educational and delivers good value. And then I've been running the podcast through there too, which is helpful. I think in some ways, and it doesn't gain a lot of viewers, but people come back to the site and listen to the podcast. You'd be surprised. I mean, you may not be surprised. This is probably going on YouTube. So there are a lot of people that listen to podcasts just on YouTube, which I think a lot of podcasters don't realize. So we have that. And then we made a lot of good videos, and I work with my buddy, Josh Satin, who kind of does the video work for no-till growers. And he has another big YouTube channel. So he's kind of been the one that instructs like how the video stuff goes. And
so do you schedule that, or you'll knock several off kind of when you have a downtime?
I kind of just do them when I have a chance. It's tough. Like videos are very time consuming to make a good video. It depends on what you're doing though. Like, I mean, a lot of the like most watched videos on YouTube are things where people are just like, they set a camera up and they're like, here's how I'm changing the oil on my car or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, those are very helpful for me. Like you can look up any problem you have with your truck or whatever, and you can be like, I'll bet somebody's done a video about how to fix this. And there it is. Those are really helpful. So there's that approach. There's just like the bare technical, like I'm a carpenter. Here's how I do my carpentry. And then there's like the videos that we make, which are a little bit more instructive. And there's, also, like I said, there's a lack of information about our scale and our type of no-till. So by putting up content, people flock to it because they wanted it. They needed to learn that stuff. So I think filling the niche is a really important thing. Like people maybe think too broadly about their content creation, trying to appeal to everybody or do something like, that's both in agriculture, and then maybe they do some like cooking videos sometimes, and then maybe they do some like animal husbandry and then some crops. Like it's got to be focused. Our whole thing with no-till growers is like super, super niche. Like we do the No-Till Market Garden podcast, which is all about that, exactly that. Then we do No-Till Flowers, which is all about no-till flower production. Then we did, and that's another podcast. And then we're doing collaborative farming. That's another podcast that'll be coming out here soon. It is all about farm cooperatives. Then we're doing another podcast that's all about winter production, winter growing, hosted by Clara Coleman, who's Elliot Coleman's daughter. That's focusing in creating a niche product, like a niche content. That's huge. Like it doesn't even matter what the subject matter is. If it's niche and it's something you're passionate about, and you can get that passion to come through. Yeah, I mean, that's the ticket. That's the way in my mind to get a big YouTube channel, like trying to be, I don't know, Joe Rogan or whatever, like trying to be somebody who does all these kind of broad conversations where he calls like an actor and he calls a scientist and he calls whatever. No, like focus, like for most people, we have to focus in and keep on our niche, because you're going to find there's thousands, if you're interested in it, there are thousands of other people, and they're going to be dedicated because you're the person giving them that information that they can't find anywhere else.
So I think you found your passion for sure, but if you had no pressure to make a buck, like you just somehow magically were given multi-millions and you could do anything, grow anything, go anywhere, travel, what exactly would you do? If I constrain you to be a gardener or just could grow anything, what would you be doing?
Oh, if I just like suddenly had infinite amounts of money or whatever, like there were no constraints, I would help other people get on land. I mean, that I think is, they're especially like, you talked about inheriting land. Like my family I didn't inherit land, but like I've had, plenty of privileges throughout my life, but there are plenty of people who don't, like a lot of disadvantaged people throughout the country, like Black, Brown, Indigenous, all the people that like, we don't, they just don't grow up in situations where they're inheriting money or they're inheriting a situation. And I just think like,
I lost you.
Oh, it's probably because I cussed.
I didn't hear that last 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, good.
But there's a thought here that I am very privileged that I have this land that I have the opportunity to farm, especially later in life when I'll have a piece of it. But there's a thought in my mind that if I do the same thing as everyone else does, then I really haven't gotten anywhere. Maybe that's a bad way of looking at it, but I look at someone like you that's created a market at living on 3/4 of an acre, and it's fascinating. And at that point, then you could go anywhere, do anything. You know, you've learned how to fish. And I think this is a skill set that could scale tremendously, especially going through this COVID and getting on the other side of it. I think there's a lot of people that have had success, but they've had to stare at a wall. You know, they thought their dream was to live in a city, and now they're in a little apartment, and they're just wondering, is all this stuff making me happy? And how much fulfillment is there when you wake up in the morning and you'll hear a rooster crow or something, and you go out there and the sun's coming up, it's foggy, you get the dew in your toenails and between your toes. I mean, would you rather be anywhere else? Because this was something I experienced this year, the previous years. I'll go on a little tangent here. You know, I farming 3,100 acres, I will put my body to outrageous levels where I am working 22 hours. I don't even smoke cigarettes, but I'll get 2 packs of cigarettes and smoke them just to stay alive, you know, and drink Mountain Dew. And then you just completely crash because it's raining and you got done. And this year I'm kind of getting to the point as I develop new businesses and I don't have to push that to the limits. I feel fulfilled now doing the organic farming, and especially, I know I'm going off on all these different tangents, but when I would come home from spraying and I knew I had chemical residue on me and my kids would come up and hug me, you know, and then this icky feeling like, what are they hugging? And why can't I see them for half a week? I feel like there's this yellow brick road or something. I don't know. It's a fulfillment. I don't know if you can make any 2 cents of that, but this is the path that I want to go on. I want to meet guys like you, and I want to go hang out with you for a day or two and take it all in and grow it. But like you were saying, you know,
it's got to be
what if you had all these kids that you're showing how to do this and they only need an acre? It's an amazing idea. It's not an idea.
I mean, think of that power though. Like that's such an amazing thing that somebody could do. Like Hannah and I, we're selling our last property, Hannah being my wife. We were like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could just give it away? Like if we could afford to just give it to somebody and be like, it's yours. Like do with it as you want, you know. That's the sort of mentality. Like, I think that there's this scarcity mentality that even permeates the farming world of like, I need to have my acreage. Like I need to own it. I need to keep it. But for what? Like, look at how powerful we are. Like I could do so much with an acre of land. Why do I need, you know, very much more than that? Like maybe I want some woods and stuff, but like, you know, an acre of land, like I could do hundreds of thousands of dollars on that if I wanted to. You know, like I don't need much more than that. And then imagine just being like, I'll give a little bit more to somebody else. And we're not in a financial situation to do that yet, but I hope to be one day that we can just literally give it to somebody else and be like, not only am I giving you that land, I'm going to teach you how to use it. And you can ask me questions all day long. I don't care. Like I'm going to mentor you and that is your piece and you do whatever you want with it. That I think is like, that would be such a huge power. I wish I had that. You know, at some point, maybe I will, but that's like that to me is fulfilling, like helping other people, trying to get them onto land, you know, giving them that power of like that same thing where you're like, man, an acre of land is so much, like it can be so much soil. And
You
I mean,
you are empowered. You have all these podcasts. You're open source. You're sharing all that. I think a teacher doesn't understand the ripples when you are open and putting all that information out, even just the little things, you're putting those ripples in probably hundreds of thousands of minds.
yeah.
If you die tomorrow, I mean, you live on there.
Yeah.
So
Which is,
we don't have to.
that's satisfying, but
Yeah.
I think also like one other thing to like the satisfaction, like the sort of fulfillment element is there's this really big Harvard study, and I even mentioned in my book, it has nothing to do with farming. Harvard study that started, I think, in the 30s, and it went on for like 80. It's still going on, but it went on for like 80 years. They brought in a bunch of like inner city kids. It's like they just brought in a bunch of people into the study after they basically like have been following these people from Harvard for 80 years, and then their family. And then they, like I said, they brought in a bunch of other people from Boston and all over. And they kind of just have been following these families and trying to figure out like what makes them happy at the end of life. Did you lose me? Oh, okay.
Oh, my damn phone rang. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. So they brought in all these people to try and figure out like what makes people happy at the end of their life. Like, what do people want? And there's just so few people sitting there being like, I wish I had more land. I wish I had more money. Those are important. They cause stress, right? Like if you don't own your property, if you don't have money, those are stressful. But like relationships, all comes down to relationships. The quality of your relationships is what determines how happy you are at the end of your life. And I think that has like really shaped how I view what I do with my time and how I'm spend time with my family. Like we're done at 5 p.m. I don't care. Like we'll make it through the year if we lose a little money by me being done at 5 p.m. But I'm done at 5 p.m. Like hang out with the kids, hang out with the wife. We are a family, and that's really important to us. And that to me has been the most fulfilling thing. Is not necessarily the work outside, although I think it's really important. It is very fulfilling. I love doing it every single day. But it's also those relationships. Like that's what ultimately, research has pretty much shown that it's relationships. Like that's what makes us happy. And there isn't an amount of money that is ever satisfying. But I feel a satisfaction with my friends or like with my family. Like those are things that are actually satiating. And I think trying to figure out how to turn that into a model of living is a little bit more difficult. Like how do you live in a world where you're turning relationships into a form of capital? It's a little complex and a little abstract, but the more you figure out how to do that, the happier I think you become. And the more empathetic and the more like, the more you're able to look at what you have and be like, I have a lot, even if you don't have a lot. Like I have a lot, and we're not wealthy or anything, but we have a lot. And how can we utilize that to build relationships or like help other people build relationships to make them happy at their end of life? I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I think about, like in terms of that satisfaction. Like, I can do a lot of stuff. We lived off grid for 4 years, and we didn't have running water or electricity.
Lived off grid for 4 years.
Yeah. In a cabin in Bug Tussle, Kentucky. And we didn't have running water. We didn't have, we had running water right at the end. We got a ram pump that was a hydraulic ram pump that pumped water up the hill into a tank, and that gravity fed down to the house. But we pretty much lived there, hauled all our own water, had like an outhouse. It was super old school. And we, charged our stuff in the cars on the way to market. And, that was it. Like it was super hardcore.
So how long ago was that? It was like 5 or 7 years ago? Yeah,
it was like 5 years ago that we did that. So it would have been 2012 is when that sort of started. And then we went for 4 years, and then we had a kid. Honestly, like the lifestyle wasn't why we left it. We left it because we had a kid and we wanted to be closer to family. And then we found a property, and that property wasn't necessarily off grid. Like we're open to the idea of going back to that lifestyle. There was nothing, I have no qualms with that. It's very, you have to be very engaged with it. Like it's every day you are like in control of your heat, or you're in control. But like we just had an ice storm. You and I were talking about this. We just had an ice storm in that situation. Wouldn't have thought twice about it. Wouldn't have mattered. But here, like if we lose electricity because the power goes down, that's a bummer. There it was like, man, I don't care. I called my mom once, and she's like, I think it was it was during those polar vortexes we had a few years ago. And it was like -15. And I called mom and I was like, Mom, I just wanted to let you know I'm okay. And she's like, I'm not worried about you. Fine. I'm worried about my friends. So I was like, yeah, that's kind of it. Like I could make my own, I could go outside, get our firewood,
Honey badger.
Yeah. Yeah. It was,
that's how I introduced you. Just drop you out of a helicopter and you'll be all right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that lifestyle takes preparation. I think that there's this, you have to gain some skills. And we were lucky enough to have our mentors lived really close to us. They had sold us that piece of property that we lived on and we built the cabin. But,
so is there a podcast of a guy that is completely off the grid and he only does a podcast and that's the only time he's ever plugged in? Because that would be really...
I don't know, but have you seen the primitive farming or the primitive, what is his name? The primitive guy on, what is it called? Primitive technology guy on YouTube? No. Oh shit. You're down a rabbit hole now. You're going to be stuck. Check that out. You're going to be, you're not doing anything for the next week. Apologize to your wife for me.
I can't. So 4 years off the grid.
Yeah. It's like, so
your what days... are the hacks what is the difference between now and then? Like, how would you do it differently now? Like, do you have all these setups now that would make life even better and like you're looking forward to the next time you go off grid?
I think I'd be a little bit less dogmatic about it and I'd go in with more capital, like less dogmatic in the sense that I wouldn't, feel like maybe using gasoline here or there was a bad idea, like a gasoline water pump or something. And maybe going with a little bit more capital so that it wasn't just like, here's your empty cabin, go. It would be like you get a good chainsaw and you get a good log splitter and maybe you get a good tractor and you get, you come in with a little bit of capital and you like plan it. You have to plan it like a farm. Like you have to be like, this is, exactly how I'm going to do it. This is exactly where I'm getting my well.
Polar vortex. Did you have a still or were you?
Yeah, I had a still and
splitting it.
No, we did have a still. I had the chainsaw and, that was, it was too small for what I was doing for it. I finally broke down and I took it to the machine, to the mechanic. And he was like, what did you do to this? The piston is blown. Like, what did you do to this chainsaw? I way overused it, but yeah, we had a still and that was, but that's partially because I'm not from a background of like living off grid and running machinery like that. So I kind of wore some stuff out and that would have been another thing is like kind of learn how to take better care of that stuff. And I mean, we would just cut down trees, chop them up, cure it, throw it in the wood. And then that was what we cooked on too.
Did you bury, like when I had some books where it explained like, you dig a hole and you put your onions down there. And do you know how to pretty much live through all that stuff? Is that stuff you do?
Oh, like curing and stuff?
Yeah, do you like have a cellar and store a bunch of stuff in your garden for the winter?
Most of that stores all right in the house. It depends though. Like we had a cooler. So like for the vegetables, we have a cooler and we can just in the wintertime, we just put a thermostat in there. So but when we were off grid, when we'll put a thermostat in there and it'll turn the heat up or down, whatever we need. So like we don't need cold storage necessarily over the winter. We just use it for like, potatoes and that sort of thing. When we were off grid, we just kept pretty much everything in the colder part of the house. And there was always like a cold corner. And so we just stuffed, like we had a big stack of sweet potatoes and that sort of stuff in the corner. And then we just ate through those all winter. And we also, I mean, to be clear, like we would buy stuff from the store too. Like like I said, one of the things like we started to do, especially towards the end, was like be less dogmatic about those things because it wasn't necessary. Like it was taken away from our quality of life to be like trying to do every single thing. Because the other thing is like I'm really anti self-sufficiency. I'm really pro community sufficiency.
Yeah.
I don't believe in self-sufficiency. I think that you need those skills and you need to develop them for yourselves, but to share them, to give them, or to like trade them. Like this is the thing, that we learned living kind of in the middle of in Bug Tussle, Kentucky, like an hour and a half from basically everything, was our reliance on our neighbors. They brought skills to the table that we didn't have, and we brought skills sometimes that they didn't have, and that was like a really great barter system. And I think that there's this idea of like off-grid self-sufficiency, that is not necessarily healthy. Trying to do it all your own, it's very isolating. Like, we're not really built to be on our own. We're not really built to just be like us and some people are, some people definitely do that, but we need community. And I think like the idea of community sufficiency is really important. And I think that's one thing I wouldn't do, is like try and do it alone again. I would try and get other people to do it more as a community. Like we're never going to do that probably because we have a nice place now, but like, that's what I would suggest, is like try and go somewhere where there are other people that are doing it and can help you and like train you, and that you can help them and work together. Yeah.
So I'm going to go down a rabbit hole right now, and there's probably people listening to this that are going to lose their mind here. But I want to talk about UBI because I think it's coming, and I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. In specifically the previous conversation, there's just a random story about a village somewhere where one of the most wealthiest or successful person in the community, they called Skinny. And he basically was like this 80-pound person that could basically get into any crevice and work on things. And he was one of the most coveted person in the community because of this specific skill set, and he could just do things. And if we go to UBI as automation and everything is going to take our jobs, and what do you see that's going to develop when people don't have to work for the man and do things that they don't want to do, that can, they have this new freedom to follow their passion? What do you see in 2032 when this is happening?
Oh man, I mean, the value of being able to, like, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with people being able to concentrate on their relationships and stuff. If you were able to, there's a country, and I want to say it's outside of the Himalayas, that they base their GDP on happiness, not on money. And I'm like, we don't have to necessarily go that far, but like, let's think a little bit more about that. What do we value? Why do we not value the happiness of all of the people that live in our country? Why do we not think of that as an opportunity? We're a really wealthy country, extremely wealthy country. Like, think of what we could do. We could have like a crazy happy country where everybody has a decent amount of money and nobody has to worry about ridiculous things just because they were born in a situation that they're, like they didn't have a parent around, or they, were like in a situation where it was like violent, very, very violent around them, or just impoverished. Like, what if nobody had to be born in that situation and everybody got an equal chance? And yeah, something like UBI, I don't know enough about it to really speak intelligently to like how it would work economically. But I love that idea. I mean, like, it seems to me, it doesn't, I always think of those things, whether or not they're right doesn't really matter. What matters is there an opportunity, and how do we look at that and say, like, is America the place that doesn't value happiness, like doesn't want to make sure that people have an equal opportunity and an equal footing? Like, I don't know. I feel like that's such a cool, I think the potential behind something like UBI is really huge. For people like that, I think truckers, all the hotel workers, like all these people that are going to lose their jobs from automation. I mean, what can we be doing now to ensure that they still have work, they still have something they love doing? Yeah, there's thousands of acres of land that they could be tending. They could be building their own house and, building a cabin, or like living in little communities, or what. I don't know. I mean, it's okay to be idealistic about these things.
So this land, right? So electric vehicles, it's really going to be disruptive to ethanol. Maybe you got UBI. You're doing six figures on 3/4 of an acre. And
no, we are not. There are people, but our goal this year is going to be 75,000. That's our goal for the next year. On a new farm, that may be tough. We hope that by next year, certainly, but yeah.
75, corn rallied to $5, and we're hoping to make, 1,000, 1,100 cash.
Right.
But our inputs if I rent the ground, it's competitive. So I've got to pay $400 to the landlord. And then I got all these inputs and I'm hoping to make a little buck and then it's subsidized. And we're arguing about, photosynthesis and all plants and biodiverse and all this stuff that you could put. If we disarmed almost every industry and let's say that every person had an acre to do whatever they wanted with, would we starve? Would we be healthier?
I don't know. I mean,
do you think that can scale? Like how many people out of 100 are even capable of doing what you do?
I think at this moment, not that many, but how many people could be capable of it with the right training and the right, guidance? Everybody, anybody. There's a farm that I just interviewed for the podcast. They started their farm in their late 50s and they're already profitable. They started like not as a hobby, like this is a legit market garden, Hexhamshire Organics. They're in England. And yeah, I mean, anybody. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're limited by this idea that that it's too complicated or that it's too much work or that it's, maybe going to be too expensive or something I think that we should be limited by our imagination. Like how far can we take it? Like how do we, make a plan for something like that? And I don't know. I mean, I think that I worry about the people that are going to lose their jobs a lot. And I don't see a reason why those people should not feel supported when that happens. I don't know why that's not being more talked about in Congress, that there are not more people saying like, hold up, we have this massive catastrophe coming. There are going to be tens of thousands of people out of work beyond what's already happened from COVID. There are going to be millions of people out of work. And what are we going to do about it? Like, what is our plan? Where is that plan? Like, I want to see it. And I feel like that, for everybody, like, do I think it could feed everybody? I don't think that our agriculture is really feeding that many people now to begin with. I mean, a lot of people are starving, right? Most of our agriculture is going to ethanol or to animals, and which is fine. I mean, we need more meat and whatever, but there are better ways to graze the ground, and there's certainly got to be better ways to raise animals and utilize space better and not pollute. And when we are feeding people, are we also poisoning them? Like a lot of the waterways getting, nitrogen and phosphorus poisoning on, the chemical fertilizers, all these things. Like, is it feeding people? I don't know. I always think like when somebody's like, can organic feed the world? I'm like, is the world being fed now? Is it? I mean, I'm not fully convinced, especially like maybe in America, most people can get food and we have, decent SNAP program or something. Like poor people can, sometimes for the most part get food, but there's a lot of food insecure in our country. Like, where's the food going? What are we doing?
I think we're massively underproductive on what we're using ground for. Like you said, 80% of this grain is going into an animal. It's going to ethanol, but then the DDGs are going through that, and yeah.
We could do better. And if we did better, everybody would have more fun. Like I think if we were doing better, people were living in better communities and they were not spending 20 hours on a tractor a day for, the growing season, like they would have more fun and everybody would be happier and we'd have to figure out food systems a little better, but there's so many people, so many brilliant minds already working on it. My dad always said the 90% of the smartest scientists who have ever lived are alive right now. Like, we can figure this out. The engineers are there. The economists are there. We just have to have the will. And
life isn't bad right now. We're both in fantastic lives, but I think we just keep chasing it, and there's going to be so much opportunity in the next 10 or 20 years. It's going to be insane.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I are in great positions, but I think there are a lot of people that aren't. Right. I mean, especially like COVID would obviously has upended a lot of people's lives. The food industry has just taken a massive hit, a lot of industries, but there are a lot of people that, they don't know where their next meal is coming from.
And I think that's why I brought it up, because, there's hindsight's 2020 and we're not through it, but And was it worth it? You know, I'm and you got to be it on your end. I like to do things and then observe and then see what I can get away with not doing. And um, I don't know if we need to shut everything down, but I don't know. But I think we've been talking quite a bit. I've enjoyed it. Is there some more things you want to get into before we get on?
I didn't realize how long we'd gone. Yeah.
I have no idea. I think it's probably an hour.
Right. Yeah. It looks like just over an hour. I don't know, man. I think we've covered like quite a bit of stuff. It's fun to get into philosophical stuff sort of on a whim. I hope that the listener is kind to it and considerate of it. Because you never know when you're not necessarily prepared to get into it. But I think I think those conversations are really important to have, and it's fun to have two farmers just get together and be like, what's this big picture shit? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And we didn't talk a lot of technical stuff, but like, I wrote a book about it if people want to know about our methods,
tell
and I have a YouTube channel.
Tell people how they listen to you, your book. Just no worries, let it all out. How do we follow you on Twitter?
The promotional, the promotional vomit. No, we do no-tillgrowers.com, no-till market garden podcast, that you can find our podcast there. We have several offshoots of that podcast. Like I mentioned, no-till flowers, if you're into flower production, very high profit in flower production. The collaborative farming is going to be focused on like, a lot of cooperative farms and all the different scales and models to figure out how to work with other people. Because another thing, kind of what we talked about, is like farming is very isolating. It sucks to work on your own. It sucks. It's fun to have like people who have vested interest in your business. And hiring people is cool. Like I like the idea of creating jobs, but like I want somebody who's concerned whether or not we turned off the irrigation in the high tunnel. But, so like that's the idea, is like how do you build that sense of propriety? Like, how do you give people ownership in your business? And so collaborative farming podcast is going to be coming out in the spring. The book is called The Living Soil Handbook. The No-Till Grower's Guide to Ecological Market Gardening goes from photosynthesis through basic techniques like how to turn over a bed and how to manage your soil. No-Till Growers, is keep an eye on that. That's where we put through all of our stuff, and the YouTube channel is No-Till Growers as well. So that's kind of our catch-all for everything we do.
So what do you think? Me and my buddy play golf, and this time of year we're just itching so hard to find somewhere warmer, and you're a little bit warmer than us. What do you think about me just like coming down there and you showing me all your stuff going on here like in the next month or so?
As long as you don't try to take me golfing. Okay. I'm a terrible golfer.
Yeah.
The next month we're just building beds and stuff.
I think it's super interesting that you're building all this right now too.
Yeah.
Exactly how you design that and put the forethought of what you learned into this new design. I think it's be a glorious time to really pick your brain.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Holler at me. We're, it's as soon as this ice melts, it's back to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've enjoyed it. This has been great, and I can't wait to follow up and pick that brain some more. And this is exactly the stuff that is fascinating. I think exactly what you're doing right now, in 5 to 10 years, you're going to be fantastic. You're already teaching people, but the audience is going to continue to multiply and quadruple and 8, 16, whatever. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think
enjoyed it, Jesse.
I hope so. Yeah, likewise, Jason. It was good times.
All right,
man. Do you want me to leave, or are you gonna?
I didn't know. I'm fine. I mean, we can yak about anything.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Just let me know if you need anything promotional from us.
Okay.
Picture or whatever.
I can usually. I mean, it's.
You can snag something from our Instagram or whatever. Yeah, from my Twitter is fine. Whatever.
Okay. She'll probably have it out in the weekend, Saturday or something.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that works.
But if this thing is something that I want to, I am just using this as a complete selfish thing on myself to just block time to meet people a little bit better and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, if we get this property together, I think your skill set, you know, I hope I didn't piss you off at the beginning of our conversation. I didn't know like how mobile you were, because I would love to, I need someone to be like the Moses of this place, this property.
Yeah, I mean, we're not like, I'm so focused on this property for the moment.
Yeah.
Like I'm not super mobile, but there I can definitely put eyes on it. You know,
Yeah.
people that may be interested in doing something like that. You can start. There are definitely people looking for jobs in the no-till realm. So
Yeah.
it's out there.
Are you gonna
Yeah.
do any like did you see what I'm doing on grazing, like the sheep tractors and chicken tractor stuff?
Yeah,
You gonna do any of that kind of stuff, or do you not mess with?
we did sheep.
You get
We
into
did
the
sheep, and we
shit,
have a
like,
chicken.
Does that fuck up your vegetable stuff if you get
Yeah.
manure and stuff and all that stuff?
Well, it's just the organic certification. It's the 90-120 day rule. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, we have some chickens. They're like my little boys. His tractor needs some repairs, but we do that. And then we do like, we had some sheep and then we sold them because we moved to a slightly smaller property. So, sheep are not really profitable unless you're doing, it's got to be over 100 sheep is kind of the threshold to make them, to make any real money on them. And we could only do about 25 sheep. So we were like, man, it wasn't really worth it. I love sheep. I loved having the animals. Like there's something about that rhythm, but
Oh yeah.
yeah. We rotated them every day, and it was, I liked going out there, even rain, sunshine, whatever, just going and hanging out with the sheep. But yeah, it's kind of had to set that one down for a while. Maybe we'll bring them back. They're not great for the garden. They're like a little bit too compacting.
Yeah.
For what we need, we would need, how we'd want to use them. But yeah,
Sure.
that's where we're at on that.
All right, man. Well, if you're down, I'd like to hit you up, maybe March or something, and go down.
March should be good. Yeah. Holler at me. I'll let you know. It's going to be a crazy few months for us just getting those beds built for the growing season. But yeah, I mean, we're here. You can just come and chill.
I'd love to sweat it out. I'll work with you.
All right. That works. Put you on the wheelbarrow duty.
Oh yeah. All right, man.